Fresh off the Brian Williams helicopter scandal, NBC faces another scandal, this time about what happened to foreign correspondent Richard Engel in 2012 in Syria. Now, originally they said that he and his crew entered Syria from Turkey with a Free Syrian Army commander to see 4 Iranian and 2 Lebanese fighters the FSA had captured, only to be kidnapped by Assad loyalists who wanted to trade the journalists for the foreign fighters. The kidnappers held Engel and 5 others for 5 days, but left them behind when they stumbled through a rebel checkpoint, wound up in a firefight, and fled after 2 of them were killed. That was the original story. Now, afterward, Engel did more research. They dug into the story and discovered that the kidnappers who took Engel and his news team captive for those 5 days lied to them and said that they were tied to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. They are now believed to be part of a Sunni militant group not affiliated with the Shiite forces loyal to Assad. And so it looks like it was a big propaganda stunt, effectively, to fool these foreign correspondents into smearing, I guess, Assad, who'd previously had such a pristine legacy and reputation in the West. And more importantly, of course, it seems that NBC was somewhat aware of this when they were doing the initial reporting, that there were big questions about exactly the makeup of this group, what exactly happened, but they ran with the reporting anyway.
That is some fascinating propaganda. I mean, you're playing chess there, doing what you can to influence Western media in order to be on the side of the rebels. And I think that it's definitely important for stories like this to be uncovered. And I give the New York Times a lot of credit for digging into the story a little deeper and basically calling Engel out on his reporting on this incident. Because whenever you have an uprising or a rebellion, usually there'll be at least some part of the U.S. and some politicians that will immediately call for the arming of the rebels, right? And the thing is, just because there is a group of people rebelling against an established government doesn't mean that everyone in that group is good, right? And so there is propaganda involved. It is a much more complicated and nuanced issue. So in this case, I mean, you see a little bit of failed journalism, which we see a lot of in the mainstream media anyway. And then you also see exactly how propaganda works when it comes to some of these foreign policy stories.
It's insane. I mean, Richard Engel, this whole story is so indicative of just everything that's wrong with the corporate media establishment, because it's not state-funded. Why are they parroting State Department propaganda, when the truth is something entirely different? That scares me much more than having an overt, like, Voice of America or Russia Today, knowing that the bias is coming directly from that government. When you have establishment journalists actually parroting the establishment line and not telling the truth about these situations, and as you said, it's a very, very complex issue. It's not black and white. And there's a proxy war being fought there, and people are dying every day. And it's so convoluted, and I think almost on purpose sometimes there's this paradoxical foreign policy injected to make it so confusing. Here we are bombing ISIS, helping Assad, but then we want Assad out. So you have Obama a year ago, about to bomb the Syrian government, and now ISIS comes on the map, and here we are funding rebels. I'm sorry, but has that ever worked? Has funding rebels ever worked? And you have John McCain in every war zone in the world. Who's like sending him out there to go arm rebels?
John McCain loves going to
war. He
war.
loves it.
There's no question.
He
Everything is an imminent threat to U.S. national security.
He's a
crazy.
gambler on tilt. He's been wrong enough times in the past. He's going to get it right someday.
He actually used the Mujahideen's success, I guess, and the Taliban and the anti-Soviet hero bin Laden, as we touted back in the day. He used the success to actually justify arming the rebels in Syria. Because that was so great.
Leaving out the success of the Mujahideen to turn those weapons that they got in the 80s against the Americans 15 years later.
Bringing us into the quagmire that we're in. How many years is this war going on?
It's disgusting, but I think that in the case of Syria, those pushing for more increased bombings, they probably see it as the perfect situation wherein if you hit your target, great, and if you miss, you're probably hitting someone else that we despise in some other way. But that's what I wonder. So, as you're saying, it's an incredibly complex situation, shifting alliances where even the people who are ostensibly on our side in Syria, outside of this conflict, we would probably be against in another situation. And so I wonder, to what extent were they honest in not knowing the allegiances of the group that kidnapped them? Now, they knew that they were in the territory of the rebels, not loyalist-held territory, but at the same time, I wonder, the people that were sort of locals that were guiding them through that situation, how much did they know? And so really, it totally depends to me on how much they knew. Now, we know that they had concerns, NBC did, when they initially reported on this, but how sure were they that the story was wrong?
Yeah.
And how committed were they to presenting this U.S.-backed idea of what's going on there?
I think that as a news organization that refers to themselves as journalists, it's really important to have an extremely high standard in reporting on these types of stories. Now, if you're reporting on a Drake story or something like that, who cares? It's not going to have any type of real impact on policy. But stories like this, stories like these do have impacts on policy. I mean, it reminds me of the Rolling Stone story that was, of course, retracted because of the fact that Jackie, the rape victim, was basically lying about a bunch of things. Rolling Stone knew that there were parts of that story that were questionable, but they published it anyway. So in this case, if you know that there are parts of your story that raise red flags and you think it's questionable, don't publish it. Investigate it a little further to make sure that it's 100% factual.
Yeah, and there was at least one other inconsistency. Engel described one of his captors lying dead, but now acknowledges he never saw the body. Now this gets a little bit more directly comparable to the situation with Brian Williams and some of the troubles that Bill O'Reilly has had recently, where you sort of play up the story to make it more dramatic, to make the experience that you had as a reporter more exciting, more like a movie for your audience. And I wonder, this is at NBC, this is not at Fox. Brian Williams is still in a great deal of trouble because of the story that he told, where the differences between reality and the reality as he presented it. Is that really going to change U.S. policy? Probably not.
No,
that one
exactly.
helicopter was shot instead of another. That seemed much less significant than this, which possibly could have influenced some of NBC's viewers to have a different opinion of what's going on in Syria. Now, Fox is never going to come down on Bill O'Reilly, despite a pattern of these sorts of exaggerations and lies about his foreign reporting. NBC, perhaps, I don't know what's going to happen to Richard Engel. Perhaps that's why he and his team was the ones who broke these changes to the story. They're worried about
It's fascinating to me that you can be someone like Bill Kristol or Bill O'Reilly and just incessantly lie, right? And people are dying as a result of your lies in terms of Bill Kristol and these war hawks in D.C. Brian Williams, sure, he embellished, as you said, it didn't result in necessarily deaths. I mean, he's not really like parroting some sort of propaganda that's actually going to get us into an escalation of war, military action. But in the case of people like Judith Miller, formerly at the New York Times, she's all over the corporate media all the time. She should be irrelevant. She should be driven into irrelevancy. Why are we taking this woman seriously?
Well, I would say first we have to get Bill Kristol off the air. As long as he's on the air, anyone else can be on the air. Dick Cheney can lead us into war if he wants. But Bill Kristol has been wrong about every foreign war that he's ever advocated for, and he's still getting paid tons of money.
But Richard Engel, these are lies that actually people will die as a result, and it's not a joke. And I think that there should be some punishment for NBC and some serious reestablishment of what their journalistic integrity means to them.